Welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast, where we experience life being the real you. I'm your host, Randy Adkins Jr., author, teacher, speaker, preacher, lifelong learner, and we have a wonderful guest today. We have Denise G. Lee. She is a distinguished healing and leadership coach. She's renowned for her expertise in helping high-achieving entrepreneurs overcome trauma, anxiety, and emotional barriers. With a background in managing multi-million-dollar projects at FEMA and the Census Bureau, Denise has transitioned into entrepreneurship to pursue her passion for personal development. She's a survivor of a significant personal trauma, and she is empathetic with her approach to coaching. Denise's work focuses on building confidence and resilience through practical psychology, strategic planning, and empowering clients to lead fulfilling lives and businesses. Denise, welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast. It is great to have you. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Rev. I just caught myself. I asked you before we had this conversation, can I call you Rev? And you're like,
You
no, Randy's
can.
fine. But I was like, you're a man of God. So I just deflected.
Hey, that works for me. It is fine. We know that titles don't make us anything. It's just what we are all about and what we're sharing. And that's one of the reasons you're here on the Produce on Purpose podcast. And I would like for you, if you would start off by sharing a little bit about how you came to begin talking about healing and leadership and what motivated you to do that.
It is quite a journey. I think it came from a point of surrender. And I think about in my own personal relationship with the Lord, like having that surrender. And it all started with realizing that what I was doing professionally was a response to my trauma and not how God designed me to bless other people through my work. And so let me
Wow.
explain when I talk about that. So you gave a really great introduction about me, but there's a lot of pockets in between that nobody knows in anybody's story when they talk for sure, right?
Yeah.
And so while I was managing those multi-million dollar deals, I was also in a full-blown alcoholic. I was a full-blown alcoholic. I drank 2 to 3 wines a night. I had promiscuous sexual relationships with some people I don't even know their names.
Mm.
I was a person that would go into rage bursts with clients at my job. There was so much things that were out of all the things I didn't process and deal with and let God work through me. But even though on the paper everything was okay, anyone who saw me in person knew I was falling apart at the seams.
Wow. And you relate a lot of that falling apart at the seams to how you were reacting to your situations. And even though it looked potentially like there was successes on the outside and external to you, there was, it's definitely sounds like a back and forth going on and emotional wounds, particularly there. How do you feel that the emotional wounds and what you had going on in your life affected the not only your job but maybe other relationships and everything else that you had been dealing with at the time?
I can only speak for myself and the clients that I've dealt with. But when I see someone who labels themselves as a perfectionist, an overachiever, driven, very rigid, I see someone who felt out of control, someone who felt unsafe, unworthy, unheard. It wasn't the fact that they could do all the stuff well. It was the fear of not being able to measure up and succeed, which was driving them. You see this a
Oh,
lot in corporate America. You see this a lot in people who have achieved a lot. The pressure they put on themselves is nowhere near the pressure that they receive from other people.
Wow. And it sounds like there's this performance measure. And my question becomes, where does this performance measure come from that maybe someone is seeing themselves as being driven and doing all of these things? And you mentioned something that falls dear to my heart, because I believe a good part of my life I had been driven by fear. And when you're driven by fear versus driven by love, which we can go into later, of what that feeling is like and why you talked about outbursts,
Yeah.
and I think of almost like a pressure cooker. How was that in what you were doing? And you describe others that sometimes say they're the A type or driven type, and I am and feel like they're in control. But as
Yeah.
soon as something gets out of their control, what does that look like?
Well, there's a couple of things going on um, that I think the listeners, the viewers, however you're consuming, should understand. So there's an issue of temperament, right? There are some of us that are just naturally choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic. Where you guys can look it up later when I'm talking about. There's different temperaments, right?
Yes.
And you can't change that, right? That's just built into. I think about the personalities of Peter in the Bible. He was just off the chart, like excited. What do you want to choose? I want to do it. And then, I think about John, love everybody. Like there are just people that's just how they're wired, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also people that have had circumstances change them.
Mm.
And so let me give an example. Imagine you grew up in a family where your dad was gone, right? For whatever reason, because he had to work or he just abandoned the family for whatever reason. And you had a mother that was very needy emotionally, very scared. Your personality changes to more aggressive caretaking because there was no one filling the vacancy of male figure. So people can adopt personas to adapt to where they are. And in my case, I adapted to very aggressive, dominating personality because I never resolved all the hurt and the pain that caused me to put on this shell to protect myself. I woke up and I was ready to battle. And I went to sleep ruminating about all the people who did me wrong, not understanding the role I played in it.
Ooh, wow. That's amazing. And I think sometimes with fear and the driving of fear, we can sometimes be in a space where I've heard it multiple times, and I've been in situations where I felt like the world was against me. I was the only one around, and that when it came down to interactions and relationships, that it really was the way that I was seeing the situation. And so you're talking about traumas potentially, attachments potentially, that we all can end up having, that can show up in our lives as this dominating piece of our lives. Can you tell and share a little bit about how do we begin to, first of all, identify that in our lives? And then secondly, what's like the first step to start to move to more of a healthy drive as a leader and as someone that's out there trying to do and relate with others?
Hmm. So everything that I'm about to say is rooted in a concept called transactional analysis psychology. It was founded by Dr. Eric Berne. And the concept is that in order for us to feel safe, aware, and connected, we had to do transactions in order to receive strokes. So what I'm talking about is, for example, in order for me to have the transaction of us having this conversation, I needed to prove worth and value in order for you to feel the value that this conversation was even worth the merit, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was a transaction. We're having transactions all day, every day with others. For example, I have transactions with my husband. If I'm nice to my husband, he'll smile and wave at me. But I have to do a certain behavior in order to receive it. So it's a lot of gives and takes. We don't really see it because it's so autopilot for us in our culture. that we don't see the little transactions. Unfortunately, for a lot of us who grew up in unsafe, dysfunctional families, when I say dysfunctional, their needs weren't met or nor understood or cared for. We do things called maladaptive. Maladaptive is like things that on the surface seem like good, but is actually bad. For example, and I think about specifically mothers, they do this. They are, and wives, they nag and complain. Honey, you need to make sure you clean up this stuff. How many times did I tell you to do this? Remember when I had other people have this? And they're doing this from a place of fear and control and
Right.
resentment. And instead of saying, honey, I feel fearful and afraid that we might get hurt because there's stuff on the floor, it turns into nagging and complaining. So I'm trying to answer the question saying that in order to heal, you have to understand the why.
Yes. And understanding the why behind what you're doing will put you on the path to finally saying, okay, I have identified an area that I need to begin to work on or process so that it's there, but I don't even know when I made the attachment. I didn't know I had trauma. I didn't know that this was something that was every time that I would come into the situation, the feeling or the emotion that I was having, I was attaching it to maybe something I had experienced in the past. How can we start to move towards a place where now you've identified that and you say, hey, I've got a problem. I've either started talking to a therapist or started going through the process of identifying this thing in my life. What is that step that I start to take to say, can I move to a more healthy situation?
I always swing it back and ask the question, how comfortable do you feel in your skin? Because there's
Mm-hmm.
no way I can talk, or a therapist or any qualified medical practitioner can talk with you and your nervous system is shot. And let me explain when I say your nervous system is shot, because a lot of people don't know what it is. They say, well, I'm just anxious, or I'm busy and I have a lot of things. They're the fidgeting a lot, or their mind seems scattered, or they want to pile on their calendar high with stuff to do, or they're quick to be angry, or they're feeling easily frustrated and discouraged, or they get and depressive or bipolar. They're high one minute and they're low one minute. That's a dysregulated nervous system. And there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing anybody, a therapist or doctor, can do unless your nervous system is regulated. Nothing. Nothing.
Right.
So what you would do if you're recognizing you're at that wire, like, oh, I see there's something off. I'm suspicious. I'm angry. I'm paranoid. I'm easily frustrated. I have problems sleeping. I have problems eating. There's a lot of women specifically that use self-medicate with sugar and candies and bread food. So there's a lot of things that can point out there's something wrong and you're dysregulated. Hiring a therapist, hiring a doctor, talking to a coach, someone like me, is going to be a waste of your time and money. Just flat out telling you. The
Mm-hmm.
things that you can do is to reduce your sugar intake, to make sure you're getting adequate rest. I don't want to say 7 to 9 because some people it varies.
Mm-hmm.
That you make a proactive move. I knew you were talking to Dr. Shalonda Atkins and about you need to stop watching high simulating content, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're sitting there and you're watching Real House of LA, you're looking at MSNBC, and then you're wondering why you can't calm down, you can't calm down. Your
Right.
nervous system is shot. You're surging through cortisol, norepinephrine, adrenaline. It's literally like you're in a 401 race car and you're rambling down and you're wondering why you can't come to a pin stop. You can't. Your body is overactive. So if
Right.
you're doing proactive stuff, massage, aqua therapy, breathing exercises, there's so many types of somatic body work exercises you can do. Once you actually can come to a point where you can have a calm, rhythmic breath, you're not feeling frazzled, then come
Right.
and have therapy, cognitive thought-based talk. There's other tactic called EMDR, eye movement reprocessing desensitization, TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulations. There's other stuff that there's a lot of things you do before you move into talk therapy. Because if you're talking to someone and that hasn't dealt with the body stuff first, the talk is a waste of your time.
Interesting, because it sounds like you might end up in a cycle. And I've heard many times that our body has memory. And if we are in a place, it sounds like at this heightened level, it's going to be difficult to really get to a place where the mind is quieted enough to even have a conversation and begin the process. And so some of the things you're talking about is, really look at our diet, look at what we're consuming and eating, and actually slowly get into a place where we can bring our body into a place where there needs to be kind of a calmness. Now, do you think that going and getting away helps in any of these situations? And the reason I ask this is because I remember when COVID occurred and we all had to stand still and sit. And for me at the time, it was difficult because I was used to always going, and to have to sit was very hard. Is this related to something like that?
There is this thing that I always talk with my clients about, and it's about trauma culture. And so for a lot of people that come see me or they see a therapist or whoever, and they're saying, I want to get well, Denise or whoever. And I'm like, and I'm listening to their life, and everything they do and they say, it supports the things that are actually getting them sick. Like, for example, if you're an entrepreneur and you are really ambitious, you're going to associate people who have the same ambition. You're going to have your schedule support all your agenda. You're doing everything that's actually making you sick. And so when we're talking about getting away, we're really asking ourselves, are we willing to depart from the things that give us comfort? Because there's some things that give us comfort are actually the things that are killing us.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's the thing that causes you to be in the cycle that you may always be in, that you think, I am in this space of, this makes me feel good, but just because it makes you feel good, it may not be good for you. So the idea that these traumas, these things are happening in your body, you say take that first step to begin. How do you typically, now there's this crossroad that you talk about of being a leader, of being an entrepreneur, and how trauma can affect what you're doing. What are some of the top areas that you see trauma affecting that? And unresolved trauma, if it keeps going on, what does that end up doing?
It's a gradient for sure, because Randy, because there are some people who have been cycling for decades in dysfunctional situations, and their team members, their partner, their kids, they've all adapted to it. I'm thinking about one particular client where if he didn't make a deal, he would scream and yell and throw things, and everyone just knew to keep quiet and put their heads down, pretend like nothing was happening. And they were so desensitized to it when we were having a group meeting and talk about when, I'm just making up this name, Andrew was having outbursts. They actually all kind of blacked out from the experience. I don't remember what happened. So they couldn't even
Wow.
tell me what was happening because they disassociate so much from all the stress and trauma, they couldn't even accurately label what they saw and experienced.
Wow. So you even have a potential that the people that you're around and are closest to you, they are actually associating and helping the behavior by disassociating from it and just saying, that's just, say, Andrew, that's just how he is. And that doesn't help the situation when it comes down to entrepreneurship, business, or leadership. How do you finally get to a place to even just say, all right, we're wanting to do something different? Does it come down to something having to happen, or are there ways to start to identify that?
Unfortunately, most of the clients that come see me is after a bankruptcy, a divorce, a meltdown, inpatient rehab, loss of significant funds, because that's usually when we are human beings and we tend to not want to seek help. Preventative strategies. That's just, no one comes and knocks and asks to speak with you and say, I think I'm having problems. can you help me prevent problems in my marriage? Or do they come and they talk to, I want a divorce.
Right. It's already gotten to this place
Critical
where
mass.
I feel like I don't want to, I can't deal with it anymore. I've tried all of these different things, but now I'm all the way here and I need help. In that situation, what do you tell them?
Well, I always think of myself as the restoration crew because like I said, most people, they come after the storm and we're just trying to rebuild and repair. And it's really getting back to who are you, what matters most, and how do you want to see yourself? I was listening to one of your other earlier recordings and you were talking about act, be, do. And for a lot of people, we think that we can think our way into positive things, but we only can think from our place of woundedness and our brokenness. You actually have to fake the funk and act like where you want to be, not where you're at. And you can't do this on yourself. Most people just don't have the strength for that. So they literally need a guide to help reinforce the values that they already have within them.
Interesting. And a lot of what I've talked about in on Produce on Purpose and what I've
Yeah.
found is that you have to let go or sometimes call forgiveness and find those things that you do have attachments to. So every time you have a particular emotion, you've been attaching it to a past experience. There's a reason you have to let that go. Is that part of what you start to share? Because if you don't get beyond that, there is no way you can get to the positive affirmations or intention making or any of that in your life.
I always laugh when people talk about positive affirmations and intentions because basically you're saying that you can rely on your own strength when in reality you need to rely on the God and your God of your maker, but that's a different subject. Anywho, when people say about emotions, right? There really is only four main emotions like fear, anger, disgust, joy, right? But then we have feelings, which is the description of what we took in, right? And so, for example, right now, I'm feeling intrigued, which is a mix of curiosity, a mix of all these other stuff. And for a lot of us, we never really know how to label that.
Right.
We're just throwing stuff on the wall and say, I'm feeling all this stuff. I'm like, well, why are you even feeling all that? Is it even really true? Our
Hmm.
experiences, our upbringing, our culture, our where we are in time and space and the people around us can give us labels that are not even really accurate.
Right. And those can take you down a particular path, especially if you have taken that in and said, hey, this is how I feel. Every time something such and such happens, I get angry. And, we understand that many times anger is really just a secondary emotion. It could be that you were frustrated or were actually scared and it comes out, you just say you're angry. How do how do we begin to label those things in the right way and really begin to process those? Because it sounds like it's imperative that we do that not only for our relationships, but it sounds like for our businesses as well.
It's for your life. It's for your life. I want to go back. All the therapist says, here's your feelings, Will. And like, that's cool. Like, whatever. Like, you got something. Ain't nobody going to be running around with a pinwheel all day looking at stuff and labeling. I always think of it, let's step it back and let's think about it a different way. So let's think about primary colors, red, yellow, green, blue, right? This
Yep.
is going to be incredibly awesome for some of y'all right now who are listening. So let's think about what red is, the color red, right? Like literally you're flaming red.
Yep.
What happens when there's a light on your red when you drive in? What you do when the light is red and when you're driving your car?
Stop.
You st- you stop, okay?
Stop.
Boom, stop, okay? So we got red. Let's think about yellow. What happens when it's yellow? It's not red. You're feeling a little anxious, a little nervous. What do? We proceed with caution.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow, okay?
Slow down. Yes.
Slow. It says slow. We're not there, but we slow your roll a bit, right? So red,
Right.
yellow. All right. Let's talk about. I'm going to talk about blue, and then we'll talk about green because green's kind of obvious. So let's talk
Yep.
about blue. you're depressed. You're feeling literally the color blue.
Right.
So here's the tricky part, guys who are blue. Here's the tricky part. For some of you guys who are used to being blue, that's where you go into overeating, over drinking, self-loathing, going on YouTube, going down the rabbit doom scrolling on Instagram, right? Tapping into your vices. That's actually the bell ringing for you to activate all the vices that got you in the bleep show that you're trying to get out of. So when you're feeling blue, right? This is where you crank up your praise and worship music. This is where you call a friend. This is where you say your affirmations. This is where I'm a big believer of reciting scripture. Whatever
Yeah.
is true and noble and worthy and pure, like focus on those things.
Yes.
That's your antidote for that, blue.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're green, what do we do when we're green?
Go.
We go. So there you go, guys. It's a lot more simple than picking up that feeling. Well, and don't get me wrong, the feelings will have this place. But I talk about brass tacks, how we're going to live in the real world.
Yeah. And that's interesting because, of course, as you're saying that, the only thing that comes to my mind is the movie Inside Out. And they actually align with some of those colors that you talked about, because we do have these emotions that drive us. But the emotions themselves, we do have to interpret those emotions. And then how does that end up in our behavior and how we end up acting out? And like you said, for someone who's blue, you're acting out. And sometimes vices come out of that. Your behavior is a reaction to a particular way that you may have been, an emotion you had, you attached a feeling to it. Now you are in a particular place and you're behaving a particular way. And it's something that can be dismantled and changed. And I think a lot of people believe that that cannot happen. Can you share a little bit about that and what you have noticed in some of the people that you've met, where they have actually moved from a place where they had those behaviors because they had those attachments, those bases, and they finally found a way to dismantle it and come to a place where there is hope?
Well, before I get to that part about the examples, I like to just make a comment on Inside Out too. That it was
Yeah.
on my mind when you were mentioning that. I watched both movies, Inside One and Two, both excellent movies. And I'm not trying to do I shouldn't do spoilers because you should have watched it by now. But anywho, when they introduced the character of anxiety, she had all these bags, and she said, I'm here, I'm anxiety, I got a lot of bags. Where do I put it?
Yes.
And I just sat there and I was like a mic drop moment. Anxiety brings baggage. And some of y'all just take all them bags up in your house and park it in the corner, crowding out space, and you wondering where you don't feel like you have no room to breathe. You're crowded in your mind. You're scattered because you got all this bags. But I just had to mention that. That's completely off. I just had to mention that one. It's on my mind.
Let go of the baggage. Yes.
I remember when I was healing from my recovery journey, I was listening to Erykah Badu's Bag Lady like 10 times a day. That song, Bag Lady. Anyway, I wish she took her own advice. But anyway, getting to the point about that. So there's a really wonderful idea called neuroplasticity, okay? So neurons, right, our nervous system, the little cells, nervous system, plasticity make new.
Yes.
So there are wonderful books that support the theory. Dr. Norman Doidge wrote 2 books, How the Brain Changes Itself and How the Brain Heals. Wonderful books, side-by-side companions to read too. In that book, there are countless stories using sound, light, talk therapy, all or different types of modalities and ways to heal. And my own personal experience, I can attest and say that I just began this conversation saying I was a rage addict. I was an alcoholic. I was a sex addict.
Right.
I was neurotic. I always felt suspicious and nervous and felt criticized and unaware. I was always talking a million miles an hour and then my eyes were scattered back and back. My body was in overdrive. Couldn't articulate thoughts. Remember, many people would say, I don't understand what you're saying. because my
Right.
mind was moving a million miles an hour.
Mm.
If I can sit here and explain these concepts to you in very clear, easy to understand, I think so.
Hmm.
That's proof within itself. Our brains can heal and repair.
Yes. And so it is possible to move from a place, and I think a lot of people feel like there is no hope. And so you are providing hope, and you're saying we can get to a place. We just first of all need to acknowledge and say, hey, this is something's not right, and I want to get to a place. And you're talking about the body getting to a space, and then having the conversations and moving down the path. And I guess the other question I have is, a lot of people always say, well, how long is this going to take? Because, we're in a microwave society. What would you tell them?
My eyes just went buggy every time I said that, right? Because we're so used to having packages delivered 2 days, sometimes same day, right?
Yes.
Now we have streaming technology on demand. And I think about it this way. Think about this. Remember our grandparents when great or even great grandparents say, I'm going to wash the laundry. What did that mean? I'm going to wash the laundry.
Man, they could actually end up having to go into a bucket with a washer.
That was washed with some rocks
Yeah.
and wash the laundry. Now people say, I washed the laundry. Girl, you just lifted and putting stuff in a container and pressing a button.
Yep.
Our brains have adapted to ways of processing that's instantaneous without delay. I have problems. I just pick up this device and start punching buttons and people will arrive. And if you're taking that approach to healing, expect to die early and young of cancer. I mean that generally. When our bodies refuse to let the stress evacuate from our bodies, we produce, I just mentioned some chemicals, cortisol, norepinephrine, adrenaline. Those can mutate cells. Mutate cells can cause cancer. America, we know about 1/5 of Americans, 20% of Americans have cancer at one point in their lives, right?
Yeah.
In corporate America, 1/3 of people get cancer. That's not by accident. If you are not giving your body the permission to release all that pent-up stress in your body,
Yeah.
it will impact you one way and another. And so for me, when people say, well, I don't have time for this, it needs to be quickly, I need to have agenda. I said, well, you know what, sweetheart, go ahead and do that. Call me when you get out of rehab or the hospital or whatever, or there's none to me.
It's always interesting because people are saying that they want the quick fix, but how long did it take you to get here? You're 20, 30, 40, 50 years into this, and you're wanting it fixed in a few months or a few years. Sometimes it's not that quick. Sometimes it takes time. But I guess the question also comes down to, people say they don't have the time, but how do they know they're starting to move in the right direction when they start going down the path of healing?
I just have to say, people don't have the time, but you have the time to call and complain. You got the time to sit there and watch drama. You have time to eat cheeseburgers and hamburgers and not go to the doctor. You have time to fuss and feud with people. So please don't tell me you don't have time. Let's just put that one out there. Let's put
It's
that
priorities, right?
It's a priority. We all got the same amount of time. You're just using it to do all sorts of madness. And it's all based on the culture. Like, I speak Spanish. And when in the Latina community, there's a thing called telenovelas. Now, look, Hollywood got nothing on Spanish soap operas. One minute somebody gets shot, then the minute somebody get married, someone get divorced, there's a gang shootout, all in one episode. Like, your head is spinning. We as human beings replicate. We have a thing called mirror neurons. We replicate what we see. Monkey see, monkey do. If you are consuming content around people that are highly adrenalized, like highly agitated, you will replicate that. And so when we say about taking time, I'm like, well, how long have you been in the dysfunction? For me, I was raped by my mother repeatedly from age, I don't know how long, until 11 years old. I also was raped by a school counselor. I was heavily drinking by 17 years old. I didn't get dry until 34. Okay.
Wow.
My body was wrecked completely.
Mm-hmm.
And this is despite the fact that I did go to therapy. I did, did try to receive help. But because my lifestyle supported my pain and dysfunction, I didn't really start getting well, Randy, until I was 38.
Right. Wow.
So everybody's journey is different. Most of the time when I talk to folks, they've been doing their drug and sex and whatever for decades. So to sit
Right.
here and say 2 sessions with me and learning your colors and maybe memorizing the feelings wheel is preposterous.
Right. So it does take more time, but it is about getting down the path of healing and moving in that direction. Denise, time has gone by so quickly. What I will ask you is, please help my audience with 2 or 3 items that they can start to do today to move away from the trauma to a space of healing in their life, in their relationships, in their business, that you want them to be left with and start.
Okay. So I'm going to bastardize a concept that we talked about earlier, if you don't mind. So the
No
first
problem.
thing, yeah. So we mentioned the why.
Mm-hmm.
Why does things need to be changed, right? For a lot of us, we're comfortable in our dysfunction because it's familiar and everybody around supports us. But if we see that something's not right, why is it not working? Why do you need to change? Because for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us, we don't move unless we see more ahead of us than behind us, right? That's
Right.
number one. Keep going back to that why. Number two, I mentioned those colors, red, yellow, green, blue. Just actually awareness of that is huge. People road raging, person. Yeah, I mean, you see this all the time. Flipping the
Mm-hmm.
bird. You're supposed to show all your fingers when you say hello to people, not just one. Know your colors, right? And the last thing is rely on something bigger than yourselves. The reason why a lot of us turn to addiction, turn to anger, turn to all this stuff is because we think we can do it on our own strength. There's someone whose yoke can carry you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it can help you along the way and help to guide you to where you are not the only one on this ship. You are not the only one guiding and moving forward. You're not in this alone. And Denise, this has been an awesome conversation. I ask you to share with the audience, how can they get in touch with you? And if there's anything that you want to share with them of helpful products or anything that you may have.
Yeah, so the best place to find me is my website, deniseglee.com. Just literally, or if you're lazy, just write Denise Lee Coach and like the internet will deliver to you. I've got over 100 articles on topics like this. Always, everyone who works with me, they take their life script. You can take it free on my website. There's a big banner that says Know Your Life Script. I developed a little short quiz for you to understand your motivations on certain behaviors that you do. So it's free to take. Just go to my website, deniseglee.com.
Denise, so awesome. I encourage everyone, please reach out to her. Check into those articles you've heard based on our conversation today. Some of the basics that we all need to take a look at in our lives. I am a witness that trauma can affect your life. And if we don't go through the process of looking at our bodies, we don't want to be in a high state of just overstimulation and in a place where we are unable to take in information. Then you want to get to a place where we can start to release those items out of our lives and start to move in a direction where we're healing, because healing is important. And one thing about healing is that it is a process. And no one says that when I cut myself that tomorrow I'm going to just be healed. And I'm not going to continue to pick at the wound. I'm going to allow it to heal. So it's a process. And so Denise has shared that great information. And do you know your colors? That's all I got to ask. Do you know your colors? If you know your colors, then you can start to identify those emotions at the basic level. And let's remember that red means stop, that yellow means slow down, that blue means, hey, I need to take a look at this situation. And green says, hey, let's go. Let's do this. We are in a place where we're ready to move. I have enjoyed the conversation. I hope everyone will continue to take in everything that we talked about today. And most of all, that we will all produce on purpose.